and they often ring up and say something like, you need to walk away from this case.
Wow.
That's no different really to if someone's fabricated an entire job.
Does that happen as well? They fake a job.
So that's probably one of the more common types of mortgage fraud. Maybe it's just out of desperation. Having a safe home is very important. Owning is often the safest way to do that. You know, I've been proved wrong before.
You knew nothing about this haircutting job.
From what I knew about the company and the job involved, it would not be possible to do both.
That's mad. Before we get on with today's episode, it would be a great help to the channel if you can click like or follow or put some comments in the comment section below. It's a great help to the channel and it's free. Now let's get on with today's show. Welcome to another episode of Is That Legal? I'm Paul Britton, solicitor in London's Mayfair and owner of Britton & Time Solicitors. In this episode, we are going to be talking about mortgages and mortgage fraud and how that can lead to criminality. I'm pleased to be joined today by a mortgage expert, a mortgage veteran, no introduction needed.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Smith. I've been a mortgage broker for 8 years now, and I've been running a company, Springgate Mortgages, for almost a year.
Great, Jonathan, and welcome to the show. It's such a hot topic at the moment. I remember there was a former SNP politician that was caught up in a scandal that was dropped, mortgage fraud. Most recently, we've had Angela Rayner resign, although not directly mortgage fraud, a bit of avoidance on tax. I mean, what do you think of that story?
Yeah, that was big news at the time, wasn't it? Firstly, to make it really clear, mortgage brokers don't actually give tax advice. But what she essentially did was she paid the stamp duty, the tax, for owning one property when it seems that actually she had an involvement in another property, which meant she should have paid a higher level of tax. Now, stamp duty, we always joke that stamp duty is the orphan child that no one wants. People ask us what the tax bill is going to be, and we can give you a pretty good idea. The solicitor tends to say, we think it's this or we think it's this, but if it's anything quirky, like in Angela Rayner's case, they say, go and get specific advice. And if you ring up your run-of-the-mill tax advisor, they tend to say, isn't that the solicitor's job?
I mean, solicitors don't ordinarily give detailed tax advice, but when it comes to a conveyance, you tell us your scenario, and it's quite a straightforward, not very exciting pedestrian calculation. In her case, she knocked the tax man by £40,000. I think that was the uproar, especially from someone who preaches all the time and was heavily critical of other MPs in government. For her to then fall foul of, I say it's a very basic calculation. I mean, it could only be one of three things when I look at it. She's either done it completely deliberately, not had the advice, or not given her solicitors the full circumstances of her, like you said, it's a second home, 40,000, so she should have paid another 40. I think she's just not given her solicitors enough information to advise.
I think the same. I think it'd be pretty bold to have just done it on purpose. I think either she made a mistake or got bad advice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's.
I did see an article come out and it said a statement from her lawyers saying, we didn't give bad advice. That's the end of it. A really important point really is like when you discuss advice that you've been given, you waive privilege on that advice, unless you say I'm not waiving privilege. But I would say she should just disclose the advice. I mean, why can't she just say, "Here's my letter. Here's what my lawyers told me."
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? She certainly had egg on her face.
Yeah.
But we know how it ended for her, don't we?
Well, she resigned, but they're all saying that she's going to have a big comeback. But right, let's get to mortgage fraud. So I think we can start with what is, for everyone listening, what is mortgage fraud?
So mortgage fraud's a funny one. Firstly, it is fraud. There's two main types. There's the organised crime fraudsters who are out there making fake payslips, fake bank statements, sometimes fake IDs, and they're probably also coaching you on how to get it past a lender. And then there's the normal person off the street who is doing the sort of other side of mortgage fraud, because mortgage fraud is also simply just portraying your circumstances in an accurate way to try and gain.
So the portraying your circumstances in an accurate way to gain. So I mean, sometimes what I hear is when people say, "Well, I'm going to round up my income." Doesn't everyone do that?
I hear that a lot, and from someone who's on the honest side of the table, and I'm happy to say that that's me. There isn't really a way of doing that without outright lying.
Yeah, but I mean, so let's say they round it up. Let's say their incomes. I mean, let's be really, in an exaggeration. So £5,000 a month they net, but they don't. They actually net 4,800, but they're rounding up to five. Surely, when they're asked to prove their income, they're just going to fall foul of that, and the lender's going to do a little forensic and say, "How is it 5,000 when your pay slip's 3 and this is that, and it comes to 4,008?" Don't they just fall at the first hurdle?
Exactly. If you're going to round your income up or think you're going to round your income up, all you're really doing is getting false hope for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because at the full application stage, the bank or probably the mortgage broker first is going to see the documentation, and they're going to see that actually you said you earned 50 grand, well, it's actually 48. So when you hear about people rounding up income, either they're a bit misguided and in a few weeks' time find out that was a little bit too optimistic, or what they're actually doing is faking some sort of document, because if you're going to say you earn 50 grand, maybe you're making your pay slips look like you actually do earn 50 grand when really you don't.
Would a good mortgage consultant pick up on it first?
Absolutely, yeah. It's funny, your income's so important, but a lot of people, if you say, right, what exactly is your salary? Life moves on, you get a pay rise, and there's inflation. Some people don't know exactly. So one of the first things I would do if someone is chatting to me on the phone or face to face and says they earn, let's say, 50 grand, when you get the pay slips, etc., check every detail. Is it exactly what they said? If it's not, most of the time it's just they've rounded up casually, sort of colloquially saying they earn 50 grand rather than anything sort of untoward.
It's around 50.
Yeah, exactly. So we will often notice that and then sometimes get back to them and say, actually, good news, your income's more or less, and therefore the figures I've given you are slightly different. So most of the time it's probably innocent, but yeah, I think people think they can try that sometimes.
So if it got through, it would have to be a bad mortgage broker, right? Let's say I didn't pick up on it, and an app went in, and the lenders then say, "Oh well, you've got it wrong," and so the client's less. Would a lender then withdraw from the process? Would they say, "Look, your client's not filled this in right. This is a lie, or they've misrepresented their position. We just don't want to lend"?
Sometimes it'll be a case of you've applied for X amount. You can't have that because they don't earn 50 grand a year. They earn 48. So rather than borrowing 270, sorry, it's 260. Does that still work?
So it doesn't matter that you've filled in their pro forma and put 50, but the actual figure comes to 46. The lender will just come back and say, it wasn't 50 in the pro forma. We looked at the income. It's 46. We'll lend X.
Most of the time.
So it doesn't blacklist you.
It wouldn't look good for the broker.
No.
That means we've not actually checked their pay slips, etc., which is pretty sloppy.
Yeah.
And there will be people just chucking anything in and doing very, very little due diligence. But yeah, it's not going to look good in the lender's eyes. And the lender does have the right to take you off their panel, which means they say, actually, you're not a reliable source of business, so you can no longer do that.
So disastrous for the broker, potentially, if they take them off the panel. But it wouldn't blacklist the client necessarily?
No, but if it was innocent,
Yeah.
and they've made quite a lot of plans to buy this property, by the time they've found this out, it's a few weeks down the line, they've potentially paid for a survey, solicitors, broker fees, they could be out of pocket. And actually, I would say that responsibility would lay with the broker then, because if someone's got their income wrong slightly, because they're just using round figures, and we've said, don't worry, we've got your pay slips, and yes, this plan is possible, and it turns out it's not, I think that's probably on the broker.
So that's the somewhat innocent, almost like slightly negligent side of it. But then you mentioned there was a more deliberate faking documents, faking pay slips. Tell me how does that look?
There are fraudsters out there who you could approach.
Are these individuals? They're just
the ones I've read about who've been busted, and there's been the sentencing's been in the news, etc. Are often individuals rather than big rackets. But
organised crime or something.
Yeah, I don't know how deep it goes, but there are individuals out there who are just very good at, I guess, tech, and can make anything look like anything. And you can go to them, you can pay vast sums of money sometimes to get pay slips and bank statements, etc., to make it look like you have a certain job or earn a certain amount, to to get a mortgage fraudulently, and that is outright fraud.
And what would happen? So let's say someone has sent you fake. Well, they're not fake. I mean, payslips, but inflated their salary by tampering with the document, and then they've supported it with tampering their bank statement, so it looks like that money's actually gone in. So they've pulled the wool over your eyes. Unless you say, I mean, can you say, "Can I see your live bank account?"
Yeah, I mean, if someone wants to achieve something and I'm the one helping them, then if I said, look, I just need, this doesn't look quite right, or can we check this, or can we check this, then they're probably going to be willing to do that if they're genuine. I've never had the need to say, actually, can you log onto your app whilst filming it, and can I see your live bank account?
Yeah.
But if someone's changing their bank statements or their pay slips, that's no different really to if someone's fabricated an entire job, an entire...
Does that happen as well?
Oh, definitely.
They fake a job?
Wow. Definitely. I would say that's probably one of the more common types of mortgage fraud.
Right, okay. So they fake the job, the income, bank statements, and then pay slips, pull the wool over your eyes and over the lender's eyes, and then they get their mortgage, buy a property, and what happens if they get caught? I mean, how do they get caught, and what happens? Like, how would you ever get caught then? You've got your money now, you're in your house.
So...
You can or you can't afford it.
Sure. There's so many different ways that you can get caught out. Let me tell you a story. There was someone I once was doing a mortgage for, and there was a few, should we say, orange flags. It worked for a family business. Amber flags, yeah.
It wasn't quite a green.
No, definitely not. They work for a family business, which in itself is not necessarily a red flag, but you're going to sort of, look at a few details a bit closer. Just because, your mum or your dad, in theory, if they're the boss, could pay you whatever they like for a few months. They've got a lot more control than others. There's a few other things, having met the person and the job involved, I thought something didn't quite fit, but, I've been proved wrong before. And then I needed a haircut, and I randomly went out to Barber's, never been to before, sat down, and there they were, cutting hair in this cash-only Barber's.
So the applicant for the mortgage was, and you knew nothing about this haircutting job?
No, definitely not. So I then looked them up on social media.
Did they not say, hey?
No. So I sat down waiting when I saw them, and they were cutting hair.
They noticed you?
No. I actually got up and left. The first thing I thought is, what do I do here? So I just left. Looked them up on social media, saw all this stuff about them. Clearly someone who's cutting hair and trying to boost this profile.
Expert skin fades.
Pretty much that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And from what I knew about the company and the job involved, it would not have been possible to do both.
Okay.
So, yeah, with that, when you do catch someone out, it's funny. We can't say too much about how we have caught them out, just because if we say, actually, your story got caught out because of A, B, and C, what we're really doing is helping them tidy it up for next time and sort of tipping them off.
So what do you say?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I have in the past said to people, look, something doesn't quite add up. I might be wrong, but I'm not going to take this any further. And that's, ambiguous enough to not cause too much offence. But when I've outright thought, no, this is fraud, firstly, there's people we've got to report it to. But to them, I tend to just say, I can't go into the reasons, but I'm not going to take this any further.
So you say, a solicitor would say, for professional reasons, I can no longer act for you.
Okay.
And if they say why, you just say, I just can't get into it. So I wish you all the best of luck.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing. I've only ever had to say it a few times, but the good thing is they've never come back with why. And that's when you've got it right.
Probably because they think, okay, something I've sent wasn't quite right. I'd better tidy it up next time.
Exactly, yeah. If they were purely innocent, you imagine you've found a broker who spent a few weeks talking to them, going down this road, and they say they're not helping anymore. You'd be so annoyed.
But with that story, it's like it's before the horse has bolted, before they've got the money. But what if the underwriter had walked in, they've given the money, and like, I recognise this guy. This is, what happens then? There must be an obligation to. It's got to be an event of default in your mortgage terms and conditions, right?
Oh, definitely. In the offer, if any new information comes to light at any point after that, the mortgage can be pulled. Pretty much the only reason it can be once it's actually granted. There have been times where lenders have rung up brokers I've not had it, but other brokers I know.
After lending?
After agreeing the mortgage or during the application, and they often ring up and say something like, you need to walk away from this case.
Wow.
And that's often all they will say.
Yeah.
Because, again, they have rules, they have to protect themselves, and they can't be seen to tip off.
Well, it's an offence to tip off, yeah.
Exactly, but when...
Knowledge is an offence. I mean, criminal offences, tipping someone off is that they're maybe suspected of fraud or is an offence. Knowledge of it is an offence. So you've always got to be careful.
Exactly. And also, like I said before, otherwise you can end up coaching them on how to do it better next time, really. And this is how we caught you out. Go be a better fraudster next time, please. But lenders have rung brokers before and said, look, you need to walk away from this case.
And the serious organised criminals who are making money from this, what do they charge?
I was aware of one person who was charging $5,000 plus for a set of payslips and bank statements.
That's mad.
Yeah, it is. And you would think if someone is committing mortgage fraud, then affordability is going to be one of their big barriers, but it's actually not always the case.
So they'll say, give me £5,000, I'll produce you fake payslips, fake bank statements, and you can then try and obtain a mortgage review.
Yeah, exactly. This person was helping tradesmen primarily.
Okay.
And builders can earn a lot of money, can't they? These people were earning a lot of money, but they were declaring 20, 25 grand a year to have a lower tax bill.
Because people always talk about cash and like people freak out about it, but cash is perfectly legal tender. The bit that becomes the problem is when you don't declare it.
Yes, yeah, of course.
You don't even have to deposit in a bank, but it's the not declaring.
Yeah.
You keep it wherever you like, but you've got to declare that you've earned it so that
That's
it can
it.
be subject to the appropriate tax.
Exactly, and you can.
And it becomes dirty if you don't do that bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's this kind of group of people he was helping were declaring 20, 25 grand to have a low tax bill, and
Then they couldn't borrow.
exactly. So there were documents and personas invented to make them look like surgeons and similar on 70 to 100 grand plus to allow them to get that mortgage. So, one of $5,000 lump sum for them, you think, oh, that's a lot of money. But actually it's saving them sort of 10, 15 grand a year, every year in tax, because they're not having to declare what they actually earn.
Before we continue this episode of Is That Legal, a word from our sponsor. This episode of Is That Legal is sponsored by Oliver Lorenz Studios, your on-demand design team for B2B service providers. They're your dedicated design partner, delivering consistent, high-quality creative without the overhead of hiring in-house. Think bold branding, polished presentations, and visual content that actually moves the needle. Check them out now at oliverlorenzstudio.com. Design support just when you need it. If you inflate your income, so if you were on 50 but you could successfully convince a lender that it was 100, would you get a better rate if you borrowed less than your maximum? So let's say your income was £100,000. No, your income wasn't. You can prove that your income is £100,000, but it's not, it's 50, right? And the lender will say, we'll give you 3 times income, so we'll give you 300,000, but you only want to borrow 150. Because you're only buying 150, does it make you low risk because it looks like on paper you could borrow 300, but you're borrowing less? Will you get a better rate?
Sometimes if you earn a certain amount over certain thresholds, sometimes there are premier products that likes of HSBC and Barclays like to offer where you might get a slightly better rate. So you might then want to make yourself look like you earn more. But for most people, if they're trying to increase their income illegitimately, it's normally to be able to borrow more than actually allowed.
Okay. And then so ways of getting caught, we've got, well, sometimes you can walk into their barber shop. I mean, is there any due diligence that the lender does post completion of a property, post lending? Or do they just let you get on with it and hope that you just pay every month?
Yeah, that's one of those sort of grey area, well, not grey areas, but unwritten thing. They don't talk about it.
Okay.
You don't hear much about what lenders are actually checking post completion. Arguably, their job is to check the application and check it fits and that they're following all the rules, so that if the FCA come knocking and check through their files, they've done nothing wrong. In theory, if you bought a property and then your circumstances change 6 months down the line drastically, let's say you did have a really high-paying job that suddenly you stopped. Well, yeah, I don't think they're really doing that many checks afterwards.
No.
Maybe that's the next big thing. tech is kicking in a lot. There's a lot of things people can do after the fact now. HMRC can notice a lot more than they used to. So maybe checking on people later on is the next big thing that tech's going to allow banks to do.
If AI allows for it.
Yeah, if AI can pick up a bit.
Well, a lot of people say there's like two sides of the coin. Are these people intentional criminals, like set out to deliberately defraud a bank, or are they just innocent, desperately trying to buy a property?
I think there's people doing it en masse who are making money out of it, who are outright criminals, and they don't care who the victim is, but they've just decided to target banks. But then there's a lot of people who maybe it's just out of desperation. Having a safe home is very important. Owning is often the safest way to do that. So I remember in RE when I was a kid, and teachers saying, like, is stealing bad? And obviously the whole class say, yeah, of course it is. And then they say, well, what if your family is starving and it's to get a loaf of bread? And then the whole class sit there and go, I don't know. And there are people out there who might have a by any means mentality because they want and need a home, and they've been told or they believe that they cannot get one. And I think the stakes are pretty high. If you imagine you get a mortgage today on a 300 grand place, or you rent forever, in 30 years' time, you own that 300 grand place outright, but it's probably worth 600 grand now. But you've probably been paying the similar amount every month, mortgage or rent, etc. But
equitable growth, you get some equity, don't you?
Yeah, at the end, you're left with a 600 grand nest egg. The alternative was zero. You're still renting, and that's it. So
paying for a service, they would say, though.
Of course, yeah. But at the end, you're not walking away with anything. So it's the stakes can be pretty high, and I think that's why people can be quite desperate.
And in British society, owning a property, we're quite hell bent on it. It's like the jewel in the crown, isn't it? You've got a good job, you've got some wealth. Have you bought a property?
Exactly, and I think our system is set up that to be financially secure, you kind of need to, unless you've got lots and lots of money, and therefore you can have the flexibility that comes with renting. But for most people, their pension's probably not going to be enough when they come to retire, and therefore having a property that you can either downsize or do equity release, whatever it happens to be, that asset for most people is essential if you are going to have financial security.
So if we're seeing this type of fraud going on with mortgages, and people who probably can't afford the properties are buying them, then arguably there's going to be more buyers, so more houses are going to be sold. I mean, is that in some way raising the price of houses in this country? Is it unnecessary? If there's more buyers and you're able to secure lending for expensive properties, agents often value the property on what they sold the last one for, and because they sold it so quickly, even to a fraudster, does it not just bump the price up all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think after COVID, there was this pent-up demand, and there was lots of buyers out there, and prices got a bit crazy. It's kind of why the rules are there. People can feel they're a little bit unfair when they're told how much they can borrow, but actually, if you could borrow as much as you want, the 07-08 crash partly happened because of loose policy, and prices were going up and up and up and up. You could buy a house for 200 grand, people do it on interest only, and they knew that in a year's time it might be worth 300. It wasn't sustainable. So the rules are kind of to keep that in check, and that's why it might feel unfair to some, but actually the rules are there to protect everyone, really.
I mean, it's a massive knock-on effect. So if house prices are becoming unnecessarily expensive, those in legitimate jobs need to move up and earn more, so they need to be paid more, ask their employer for more money, the employer gives them more of a salary increase, and then in order for the employer to pay that salary, they've got to put the price of their products and services, and then anyone buying those, it's circles complete, everything becomes more expensive.
Exactly, you're just chasing a tail, really. It's like the energy prices after a few years ago, everything went up in almost the exact same way that you've just said. So keeping house prices, I guess, stable is more possible because there are tougher rules in place
for the whole cycle. I mean, how do people rationalise the ripping off of the lenders?
I think, if they're doing it for financial gain because it's organised crime, then I think they've got very little empathy.
Is it like back in the day when everyone was doing whiplash claims? They didn't care because they're like, they had the smallest little prang and they're, I've got whiplash. And then they get £800, £2,000 payout, but they're like, well, that's okay because it's just a faceless insurance company.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good comparison. I remember that happening, and everyone was doing it, weren't they? And that was widespread. And mortgage fraud, I don't think is widespread at all. I think most people are well within the rules, which is great. But yeah, in the same way, those insurance companies are faceless entities. I think people can view banks in the same way and have very little empathy for a bank.
I mean, do you have sympathy for these people, or are you more, this is just fraud?
I think we have to take a pretty black and white approach. You know, if we think
As professionals.
Exactly. Yeah, we have to take the emotion out of it. If someone is breaking the rules and we were to suspect that or prove it, then we're going to have to disengage with them immediately and potentially report it as well through the proper channels.
But it's probably like the loaf of bread example. Starving family, loaf of bread. Trying to get on the housing ladder, obtaining a mortgage for £100,000-200,000 just to put a roof over your head, which obviously in the South is a very modest property. Or is this at the far end where someone who's already rich, clearly not starving, clearly doesn't need a house, is borrowing $3 million to buy that mansion and committing fraud? Maybe the sympathy scales will tip.
Yeah, there's definitely people who people might ask you a question sometimes like, is this possible? And the outright answer is no. And often they're like, oh, okay, so I thought I'd ask. But sometimes I do sympathise with why they have asked that, and you see why someone wants to achieve something. But I think what I've definitely noticed recently is, a few years ago, I would speak to clients, and I would say, you can borrow X amount, and the next words out of their mouth were, yes, please, because everyone wanted to borrow the maximum.
Yeah.
Rates were so low.
Well, my dad said to me, borrow the most they'll let you borrow, because you'll always make those mortgage payments, Paul.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, you'll have a decent house, a decent amount of equity. Just whatever they'll lend you, go and spend the maximum. Because you'll give things in your life, no holidays, no teas, no coffees, discounted food at the supermarket after 6 o'clock, but you'll always pay your mortgage.
Yeah, and that's, I think, quite a common outlook. I think people who've always maxed out traditionally have done very well. But at the moment, where people used to get very upset sometimes, say, hang on, I'm paying £2,000 a month in rent, but the bank's only going to lend me X when the
That's mad, isn't it?
Yeah. What, £2,000 a month in rent?
Well, I mean, if you can show that you can afford £2,000 every month for the last 5 years, and the bank says, yeah, we don't work it out like that.
Yeah, true. The last couple of years, I think, have helped people understand that, because what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years is rates have jumped from the 1% where people were saying, hang on, why won't they lend me that when my rent is £2,000 a month and these payments are £1,600? Why won't they lend me that? What's happened is those people who would have or could have had a mortgage at £1,600 a month are now paying 2.2, 2.3, and they're the same people going, actually, this is horrible.
Quite quickly, it's become unaffordable.
Exactly, yeah. So what lenders will do is they'll look at, it's not the rate at the time, which strongly governs what the payment is. They're looking at worst case scenarios. If rates jump up, can you still afford it?
I think that's a really important point for anyone listening, that it's not just the current rates. The bank has taken a responsible step to say, what if it was 3%? What if it was 6%? You wouldn't be able to afford it then. So they're trying to protect you.
Yeah, exactly. They are in lots of ways. Yeah, which is not always popular opinion.
No. Okay. Punishments, crime and punishment. What are the repercussions for someone that commits mortgage fraud?
It is serious. It is no different to any other type of fraud. If you were to be caught, it's large fines. They could take the asset away, which is pretty serious. Or they could say, keep the asset, but you've got to repay the whole mortgage, which is often impossible.
So if you've got a £600,000 mortgage, they're like, pay it all back now.
In which case, they're probably handing the asset back.
I mean, you were borrowing 600 in the first place because you didn't have 600 in the bank. So to ask for it, so you're going to have to sell the asset.
Yeah, or give it back.
And hope you're in positive equity.
Hopefully, yeah. But there's usually fines involved as well, which will probably eat into that. And even prison.
Okay. Yeah, what, the police, if they refer it to the authorities, the police...
You can go to prison
under the Fraud Act, yeah.
Yeah, you can go to prison for mortgage fraud.
Yeah, okay. So quite serious.
Yeah.
Anyone listening to the podcast, if you're going to do it, you could end up in jail, lose the asset and be at square one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's a lot to risk. So would you say buy within your means?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And play within the rules and speak to a decent mortgage broker who's going to explain what those rules are. Because for most people, the first time they say, right, now's the time to buy a property, granted, you don't know what's possible, you don't know what the rules are. So you speak to an expert and, you'll soon learn how it works. And most people are more than happy to follow those rules.
Okay. I mean, I mentioned it briefly earlier. I haven't given it much thought, but AI is such a topical topic at the moment. Is AI helping your role? Is it helping detect fraud? How have you seen AI being used in the mortgage industry?
So it's sped up a few tasks for us. Some sort of analysing documents, organising documents, things like that. Lenders are working on quicker ways to submit applications and things like that. But other than that, I think AI is still in its infancy. But where AI potentially could affect this particular subject is, I mentioned these fake payslips, fake bank statements. I mean, I would have no idea how to make a fake bank statement. If you think all the columns and the lines, I wouldn't have a clue. But, so you'd have to probably find an expert. But now there's probably a guy or a girl in every office who's pretty sure they're a ChatGPT expert and could knock something up. Now, if those people are that way inclined, potentially you'll see an increase in people doing the sort of DIY fraud stuff.
But then, I mean, what a lot when we've seen that in the legal profession, you then build your own AI to counter that AI. So you might say, ChatGPT, can you edit this bank statement to reflect X pounds income? Then when you submit it to the bank could, or the lender, any lender, could put it through a AI detection model, and then it could say, this doesn't line up, the font's changed, it should be like this, or we've seen 10 pay slips from the same company. This one's slightly off by point, the chances of, I mean, that would be a clever bit of AI, wouldn't it? One AI against another AI.
That's life. In a few years, I think that's what it's going to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
But in the same way that tech potentially could increase fraud, I think it's also going to help combat fraud. Banks can share data really easily now as well. There's an organisation called CIFAS.
Right.
Essentially, once upon a time, if I went to Lloyd's and I got caught out, I could just go nationwide and try it again.
Because they don't talk.
Exactly. Now, if you go to one bank and they deem it, yes, this is fraud, all the other banks are going to know pretty quickly.
I mean, we do get clients sometimes who have CIFAS markers on their profiles, and they come to us to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. And they can instruct lawyers to contact CIFAS and make an application to remove those markers if they weren't put there legitimately.
I was going to say, you have to prove.
Yes, of course. You have to say, they've got it all wrong. And this is why. And then you make an application. There's various stages. So as lawyers, we do help remove those if they've been put on there wrongly.
We have, I guess, at a less serious level, we sometimes do similar things with like the credit reference agencies. You get CCJs that shouldn't be there or should have been removed, or a default with Vodafone, and we'll often then coach them on how they can go and prove that and get that removed.
And as we're on punishments, are there any high-profile examples?
None recently, but you go sort of 10 years-ish back, there was one of the contestants on The Apprentice who got done for mortgage fraud on the broker side. They were doctoring documents themselves, whether they were changing them or creating them, and they got a custodial sentence, I believe. And then there's Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, I think his real name is. And he's in the news a lot, of course. And pretty much every article he's ever in, the BBC then list every single one of his convictions. And you'll see mortgage fraud on there. Right. And a little bit of Googling, 10 years or so ago, he was given, I think, 18 months or so for being on the customer, on the client side of the table.
Right. So he made an application. I
mean, the details are really very limited when you look online, but actually you'd have to assume then that he knew that these documents were genuine to try and borrow more than he should.
Okay.
Would be my understanding from what the BBC have said.
Right, well, and he got 18 months.
Yeah, according to the articles.
Yeah, so normally, I mean, in law, sometimes if you get less than 2 years or fewer than 2 years, you get that suspended. So he might not have gone in jail. He might have got a suspended sentence.
Potentially, yeah.
But it's still there on his marker. And does that appear on CIFAS? Is it a CIFAS marker? Has he got one of those?
I would imagine that is still shared to this day, because things like credit reports and things are 6 years, but the more serious stuff, you'd assume it's on there for longer.
And do we know if he pleaded guilty to it or did he have a trial?
I actually don't know. Again, it's something that I only learnt myself about a year ago when he's been in the news a fair bit of late, and it was mentioned in one of the articles. I then found the original article from the BBC, looked at a few other news providers, and really, other than the fact it happened, there really isn't much information on it.
When this episode goes out in the comment sections, I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to add what did and what didn't. It's going to be fact checked, so we don't have to worry too much about that.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
And that's why I was being good there to be like,
it's best if you don't know. We know that there was. It appears. That's all we're saying. I'm sure our listeners and viewers will fact check that for us. Right. So I had a question come in, Jonathan, from one of our viewers. It says that I'm self-employed, and the bank knows my income fluctuates. It's how his industry works. But because he doesn't have a neat payslip, they act like I'm a criminal unless I over-declare or smooth my earnings. If the lending system punishes honest entrepreneurs, can you blame people for gaming it? I think by gaming it means lying about their income or trying to work it. Why should traditional salaried workers get an easier path to home ownership?
It's a really normal train of thought that some self-employed people might have, especially if their income does fluctuate. For example, someone that works in events, they might earn 10 grand a month every month for the summer months and nothing for 6 months.
In events, I know someone that earns £150,000 in 1 month, has a good event, and nothing the rest of the year.
Nothing. Absolutely. Yeah, cool.
How does that work?
And if you apply in November and your event was in June, your last 3 months bank statements have nothing on there. So self-employed people do, I think it's fair to say they do come under more scrutiny, as in there's more things they've got to provide. You've got your tax calculations, which are every year. You normally need to go back at least 2 years. Whereas if I'm employed and I start a job today, some lenders will just take that income on the first day.
So you're saying if it does fluctuate like that, one of the workarounds is to show your tax returns for the last 3 years.
Yeah, not just a workaround. Like you will have to do that. And most lenders will go back only 2 years now, which is good. But what they will do is, can be seen as unfair, is they will average the last 2 years. Now, I could have had a 30 grand income paid job and then got a 50 grand salary, and I'm instantly rewarded for my promotion because I can now borrow against the 50 grand salary. But if I'm self-employed and I've earned 20 grand last year, business is doing well and I'm earned 50 grand this year, then often that's a 2 year average and they balance it out.
So in that case, an employee does benefit quite significantly to a self-employed person who has to jump through another hoop, which is their tax returns.
And potentially waiting till they've earned that income long enough for it to average out and look good on paper, for them to look like a reliable mortgagee. It's it can be seen as unfair. There is a lot of passion about whether self-employed people are treated as fairly as they could be.
But then the question would be, how else would they manage the risk? How else is a lender meant to assess your risk value?
Well, that's spot on. You only get an annual snapshot when you're self-employed. And if you didn't go off that and just went off bank statements, for example, it'd be very easy for someone to essentially have 3 really strong months and then apply based on income that is nowhere near.
And it could be worse. The lender could turn around and say, well, look, if you can't prove regular income, we just won't lend. And I bet actually you have some lenders that will say, well, we just don't lend to self-employed.
There's definitely some that clearly don't want the business.
Yeah,
and
it doesn't fall into their portfolio.
They might offer a lower income multiple, or they never give higher rates or anything, but they might have certain schemes. Nationwide have a really good scheme called Helping Hand, which helps first-time buyers borrow a lot more. And for a long time, self-employed people were not allowed to benefit from that. Or there's other lenders who will go, we'll lend people 5.5 times income, but if you're self-employed, it's 4.5 times your income. So you're being penalised again. So that can happen, and that's why I understand why someone who's self-employed might feel like they are under a bit more scrutiny.
So the guy I know who earns 150 in one event every year and then takes the rest of the year off, builds up to the next event.
Yeah.
If he's only done that for 1 year, he probably won't get lending. He'll have to wait until he's got a pattern of 2 or 3 years.
If he's got 2 years, then I think most lenders would probably do that.
Okay.
But they probably would want a bit more proof. Sometimes the meat on the bones around the actual event as well. Show us the website for it, how much the tickets,
due diligence.
Sometimes you kind of have to build a bit of a case. But yeah, if he did it 2 or 3 years in a row, then yeah, he'd be absolutely fine.
What do you say about the banks tracking your green profile? And people are saying that if you're not green enough, if you can't prove that you've got a certain green rating, you'll get a higher rate. Have you seen any of that coming through the woodwork?
Actually, do you mean like green as in like environmentally?
Yeah, your carbon footprint.
Okay. I feel like, you know, greenwashing, the term greenwashing at the moment, mortgage lenders are a little bit guilty of that. There are sometimes a rate where you might get £100 cash back or something if you buy a property that's got that's an energy efficient home. You know, no one's going to buy that property just for that £100. So they're not really incentivizing someone to do that. It's just, if you happen to be buying one, here's some money. But it makes them look good. It makes it look like they've got some sort of green agenda. I think there's a long ways to go for banks to actually truly incentivize people to make their homes greener. But as an individual, I don't think you'd be penalised for maybe, you know.
At least not yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got friends in banks who deal with lending for big developments.
Yeah, sure.
And if the development isn't green enough, they will get X rate.
Right.
And the bank will say, but if you make it greener by solar panels, wind farm, whatever, we'll give you a better rate. So they're doing it on a commercial, on a corporate commercial level, but not with individuals yet. And I think it's just a slippery slope until it does come to individuals.
Yeah, I guess the thing about the housing stock in the UK, though, a lot of it's very old. Changing it all retrospectively to make it greener would be so expensive. And who does the burden lay with? Is it the person trying to buy the place? Is it the person trying to sell the place? I think they'd love to do that. And new builds, certainly, I think new builds have to have solar panels now. So, you know, it's definitely coming into it. But
how long until the bank says, does your property have solar panels? Yes, okay, we can give you a better rate.
Well, yeah, that
so if you want to go and live in a thatched cottage, oh no, sorry, you have to pay an extra % a year.
So there are marginally better rates if you buy a very energy efficient home with some lenders. But again, the difference is so minimal that I think it probably is greenwashing.
All right, Jonathan. Well, thank you for joining us on Is That Legal? It's been a really good conversation. I think anybody who's thinking about dipping their toe into the fraudster world of obtaining a mortgage will think twice about that. Is there any last thoughts that you want to put in before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think people just to not worry, really. Most people, and I mean a really high percentage of people, are operating well within the rules and are doing absolutely nothing wrong. You know, lenders aren't on a witch hunt. They're not looking to try and catch you out for something you haven't done. So for most people, you know, if your motives are genuine, you've absolutely got nothing to worry about.
And if people want to see how much they can borrow, they can come to you?
Absolutely.
And they can find your details?
Springgate Mortgages. You can Google us, of course. You can go on our website, Instagram, LinkedIn, and contact us anywhere you want.
And we'll put your contact details in the links below anyway so that people can come through to your site. So thank you for joining us on another episode of Is That Legal? We hope that's been informative. Please remember to click like, subscribe, or put a comment in the section below if there's something you would like us to deal with it. And that's a wrap for today.